Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. The second guest of the evening is the host of The Grill is Hot Inside the Berger Shop podcast to talk about the upcoming NBA draft and the offseason. Ryan Berger, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me again. Always enjoy coming on and talking hoops.
Alrighty. So the biggest thing that happened other than the Raptors winning the championship the other day was the Lakers acquiring Anthony Davis from the Pelicans as New Orleans gets a Godfather offer back. So what do you make of this trade for the Lakers?
I think for the Lakers, it was something that they absolutely had to do. At this point, they had really broken apart the roster. Lots of bad feelings between the young players and obviously LeBron. New coach comes in, some friction with that actual situation with the loss of not signing Ty Lue. And now you have two of the best four players in the league on the same team, and clearly a team that's going to compete for the championship over the next couple of years. They have a lot of work to do to add a lot more pieces, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Obviously, we're not able to add a third max player due to the timing of the trade. Kudos to the way New Orleans handled this. My buddy, their new GM, who's a close friend, Trajan Langdon, just got the job about 3 weeks ago and did just a fantastic job in the overall trade, from getting all the different pieces and picks that they wanted to actually forcing the Lakers to make this trade a little bit earlier, which obviously not only allowed the Pelicans to get the fourth pick, but also allowed them to sort of screw the Lakers a little bit when it looks at how much cap room that they have. Only think about $24 million instead of the max number. And I expect the Lakers to, I expect there to be a lot of players interested in taking slightly less and sort of rounding out the roster. I would think a veteran point guard would be really interested in going there. But the key to them is they have to have shooting, something that they really lacked last year in LA. Kuzma is a player that they held in this situation and can certainly fill it up. But I expect them to make some heavy runs at guys like J.J. Redick and others who can really fill it up from the outside and can really help stretch the floor. And that's really what they need right now is a group of players who can help not only bring the ball up, but stretch the floor and open up the opportunities for guys like AD and obviously LeBron on the way.
Yeah, and you mentioned a guy that I think would be very interesting for the Lakers, and that's J.J. Redick. I have a feeling that that's a possible target for them. And another guy I'm hearing linked to them is Kemba Walker. I'm not sure if he would go there, but what do you make of the fit of Kemba Walker in Los Angeles with LeBron and AD?
I don't see really either of those guys going. I think Kemba is a New York kid, East Coast guy. I'd be shocked if he were to go across the country and have to take significantly less. Again, they can't offer a third max star. So when you think about the $240 that Charlotte could offer him, I'd be stunned to see him take $100 million less to go to Lakers. So I don't see that happening. Redick is a great fit, but I also don't see it. He lives in Brooklyn. He's got a young family. He commuted down to Philadelphia to play for the Sixers. I'd be shocked to see him also go across the country, sort of change his entire situation with his. I expect Redick to try to sort of hang more on the East Coast. I wouldn't be shocked if he re-signed with Philadelphia again. So those are two names that I know are being thrown out a little bit. I'm not sure I see the fit for either one of them. I mean, I see the fit for Redick. I just don't think it'll happen. But it'll be interesting to certainly see what happens.
Yeah. And how about the draft? That's going to be taking place Thursday night. The latest smoke rumor I've heard is that the Pelicans want to trade up from 4 to 2 and pick R.J. Barrett to play alongside Zion. Are you buying that one, or do you think that's just smoke?
No, I don't see that. What I understand from the Pelicans, and again, I'm pretty connected there to the new general manager. Our kids play AAU ball together, have a lot of really good conversations with him, and an incredibly smart, strategic guy, Trajan, is they're going to have to target a couple veterans to add to that team. They have Drew Holiday. They also have Lonzo Ball. I don't see any reason why they would trade up and then take another point guard. They have 2 point guards on the roster now, including one who they just traded for. My thinking and what you'll see with New Orleans is they need to target some veterans because you can't sign and extend all of these young guys at the same time. They just don't have the money, and if these guys end up working out, they're going to end up losing guys. So I expect them to package the 4th pick and maybe Drew Holiday or maybe something else, and sort of find and identify a veteran or two who might make sense to come back in that package. It's really about how can they extend. If Ingram works out, Josh Hart works out, Zion works out, Lonzo Ball works out. There's so many young pieces. I just don't know how they're able to extend all of them, so I don't see them adding any more young pieces, and that includes getting out of that 4th spot and trading down or trading it for a veteran player.
Yeah, I have a feeling that 4th pick gets moved, but what do I know? Because I'm sometimes wrong about this. So another random smoke I've heard of late is that the New York Knicks are working out Darius Garland, and Jonathan Givony, who's their draft guru over at ESPN, thinks he's in serious consideration for number 3. I do not see that happening at all. What do you make about that?
Well, why don't you see that happening? Because everybody says they're taking Barrett, or because of the on-the-court talent?
I just cannot see the Knicks passing up on R.J. Barrett, or if he falls to them, Ja Morant. I know they have to do their due diligence in case they get a Godfather offer for the number 3 pick. I know Atlanta offered 8 and 10, but I don't think that was enough, and the Knicks rightfully turned it down, in my opinion. And then there's that possibility of Memphis picking R.J. Barrett instead of Ja Morant, which I don't see happening either. And then that Pelicans rumor I just mentioned is something that maybe the Knicks heard too. So it's a very interesting 48 hours approaching before the draft. So I'm very fascinated to see this plays out.
I think it always ends up happening this way. I think you get a lot of rumors that happen. Some guys leak stuff. You have a lot of outlets that need to create clicks, need to create buzz, and what you just described is really that. I think with the Knicks, Barrett to me is really a no-brainer for them at that 3 spot if Morant is gone. Barrett is a big-time basketball player. Had a great freshman year at Duke. When Zion was out, he averaged about 26 a game. That's a big-time numbers for a freshman at Duke. He's much old, plays much older than his age. Will be a member of Team Canada, and was the number 1 recruit in the country last year. Just because teams work out certain guys, I don't see that as taking him. Although, like we know, you can't put anything past the Knicks and this front office that really has a horrific track record. So you never know. But in the end, I think a lot of that is just a lot of clickbait. And I think you'll see R.J. Barrett in a Knicks uniform.
I agree with you.
I think the other thing with the Knicks is they have as they start to acquire more and more pieces, and specifically a lot of pieces from the draft, you start to see a lot of guys who might actually play the same position, and I think that's something that they're a little bit nervous of when you look at a guy like Knox and RJ, a similar size, or Knox is a little bit bigger. I think RJ is a perfect in the NBA, but I would say that, and where I'm sure the Knicks are looking, is he's not a great shooter. And in the league today, you need to be able to make the 3-point shot regularly. When you look at the team that they currently have, not a lot of shooting. When you look at guys like Knox and Barrett and Frank and some of the other older pieces, they have to address shooting the basketball. And obviously Garland brings you a shooter. You can really light it up. But in the end, I just don't see them passing on a star in the making like that.
I agree with you. I think R.J. Barrett's the third pick, and I think Darius Garland, if New Orleans keeps the pick, is in play for number 4. Although, like you said, they already have Lonzo Ball and Drew Holiday, so that really wouldn't make sense. So that's why it makes a lot of sense for them to trade the pick. And speaking of trading picks, I mentioned before that the Hawks offered 8 and 10 to New York, but New York declined it. And I think if the Knicks wanted to move off the number 3 pick, they'd have to get more than just the 8th and the 10th pick. Do you think the Hawks move up on Thursday night?
Well, I know my guys at the Hawks really well. I know they're very, very active. They have a couple guys in mind that they really like. I think, Barry is a great fit for them with what they've built with Trae Young and John Collins. I think it's interesting with the Knicks. I mean, adding 8 and 10, I'm not sure that's a terrible deal for them. Not that I would make it, but, the Knicks need assets and they need pieces. And depending on what happens in free agency, adding 2 pieces, a guy like Kobe White and, maybe another piece is a really interesting angle for what the Knicks have. And the Hawks will be incredibly active. I just don't know if it makes sense to trade if you're not going to get into the top 3. And right now, it looks like they're not able to do that. And if that's the case, I'm sure they'll sort of stay and add more. But they do have so many young pieces. They took not only Trae Young last year, but they took the shooter Hoister as well. So they've got a lot of young pieces. And again, just like I was saying with New Orleans, these teams rebuild. They have so many young pieces that could only extend a certain amount of guys. And, they're facing that now.
Yeah, and another team that I'm interested to see what they do on Thursday night is the Boston Celtics, who in all likelihood will get the Kyrie Irving. They're probably going to lose him. And then Al Horford opted out. What do you see the Celtics doing on Thursday night? Do they try to move up in the draft, or you think that they stand pat at 14, 20, and 22?
Well, I think, I think Horford opted out because of the cap space. I think that'll help Boston's cap space. I don't see him moving on. I certainly don't see teams giving him any more than 2 or 3 years. He's become really, really robotic and slow and really works nicely in the Celtics system. Celtics are another team. They just have so many assets that they've held on for so long. 3 picks in this draft now. And, what do they do with all these pieces? And they obviously tried to have as many assets as they could to try to go after Anthony Davis, which obviously didn't work out. Now it looks like they might lose Kyrie for really nothing, and then they can, obviously re-sign Rozier and some of the other pieces. When you look at some of the pieces that are available in 14 and 22, I'm sure they're trying to package a bunch of things and try to move up. I'm sure they would love to get out of that Gordon Hayward deal right now as well. Danny Ainge could be sitting there going into the regular season with a lot of assets on his team and really nothing to do with those assets. So I'm sure he's trying to work some magic. Again, the big question is who's really worth trading up in this draft? Now you look at Boston. I'm sure they'd love to make a crazy package and get John Morant as an example. But beyond that, Barrett really doesn't fit with their team. And obviously, Zion's untouchable. So, tough situation for Boston, losing out on a lot of pieces and then losing potentially one of their biggest stars in Irving. That said, this team is better without Kyrie. They proved it to us not this year, but the year before. I think losing him is a sort of addition by subtraction. It'll be interesting to see what Ainge and company do on Thursday night.
Yeah, they're a team that's really intriguing to me for Thursday. Who do you have as a sleeper player in mind? A player that's not getting enough attention. You mentioned somebody that I have as my pick for this. I want to see who your sleeper player is.
Well, I have a couple sleepers. There's some guys I really like and some guys that I'm not so high on. I think when you look at the first round, Kobe White is, I'm sure that's the guy that you were talking about. Really interesting point guard, freshman out of North Carolina. He's fast, big, needs to work on his jump shot. 6'5", 190. Can certainly play the 1 for most teams. Jared Culver is a big-time player out of Texas Tech. He's 6'6", 195. So if you think about like Culver and Kobe White, they're actually the same size. But Culver feels like he's just much bigger and played the 3, and Kobe White plays the 1. Those are 2 guys in the top 10 that obviously a lot of teams are interested in. I also really, really like the kid out of Kentucky, Kelvin Johnson. I think he can fill it up. The wild card is clearly Ball, 7'2", only 210 pounds, freshman out of Oregon. After a couple games out of his freshman year. He needs a ton of work, but he's got an incredible amount of potential. He's got great size, but he doesn't really like to beat the paint at all. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. From sort of guys that I'm not too high on, Cam Reddish, I'm not high on at all. Did not like him at Duke this year. Shoots a terrible percentage. For some reason, teams have him going in the top 10. Again, that's probably because of his size, 6'8", 210. Big kid who can obviously fill it up. But I wasn't a big fan of him in high school, and I'm not a big fan of him now. I don't like the big kid out of Maryland, Bruno Fernando. Very, very robotic. Doesn't give you anything but sort of under the basket, dunking the basketball. I think he needs a ton of work. Two other guys that I really, really like, and it'll be interesting to see where they go. The first is Naz Reid, New Jersey kid, Asbury Park, played his freshman year at LSU, was the best player for the most part all year for LSU. Left after his freshman year. He needs to improve a ton, including dropping some weight. But once he drops some weight and gets a little bit quicker, he can be a big-time player in the NBA. His body is fantastic, 18 years old. And then there's another kid at a Hudson Catholic High School in New Jersey as well, who went to Oregon and has left after his freshman year. And his name is Lewis King. And he, again, 18 years old, left because of the potential that he has. He's probably not ready for the league yet. I'd like to see him slip in to the late first round. I think he's probably going to be an early second round pick. But Lewis King can really play. 6'8", small forward, Hudson Catholic High School, and 1 year at Oregon. So a couple of sleepers and a couple guys that I really think are a little bit overrated.
Yeah, I agree with you on a bunch of them. I love Kobe White. He really impressed me in North Carolina. Someone I'm not high on was his teammate, Nasir Little. I feel like he was a disappointment last year at North Carolina. And Cam Reddish, I think, is a little overrated. I agree with you there. I like Lewis King. I remember watching him in the tournament last year. He was pretty good, especially when that team went on that run without Bol after he got hurt. They won the Pac-12. He was the leader of that team, Lewis King. Another guy I really, really love is DeAndre Hunter, who I think has a chance to go fourth, assuming that it's chalk in the top 3. I really like DeAndre Hunter. He reminds me a little bit of a poor man's Kawhi Leonard. What do you make about DeAndre Hunter?
I don't like him, and I don't see the Kawhi Leonard fit at all. I think Kawhi is a much different player than him. If you remember Kawhi at San Diego State, very focused on the defensive side of the ball, and has really improved his offense. Every game he played, he never took off. I don't like Hunter's motor at all. Too passive for me. Way too passive in the NCAA tournament before sort of taking over a couple spots. I'm not a big Hunter guy at all. I wouldn't be surprised to see him drop.
Oh, wow. I was surprised you disagreed with me on that one. Culver, I don't mind. I like Jarrett Culver. Another interesting guy to me is Romeo Langford, someone who got hurt last year at Indiana. But to me, he just has to develop a shot. What do you make about Romeo Langford?
I think he was a little overrated coming into college. He did not have a good year at Indiana. Really struggled shooting the ball. Struggled running the team. I could see him going in the latter half of the top 20. I think maybe when you look at the kind of things he can do, he's done a lot of them. I think Detroit really likes him. I think Detroit has the 15th pick, but I could see Langford drop the guy who most people thought would be a lottery pick when he left high school and declared to go to Indiana, but he really did not have a good year at all, and he needs a lot of work. And in the NBA, I just don't know what he's going to give you on a night in, night out basis.
Yeah, and then a guy I disagree with you about that you like, I'm not a big Keldon Johnson fan. He showed some promise, but to me, he needs to work on his defensive game a little bit. To me, he's somebody that has to be drafted by the right team. Like, if he gets drafted by Boston or San Antonio, then I think he'd be fine. But if he went to, like, another team, I would be a little skeptical about Keldon Johnson. What do you make about Keldon Johnson? What makes you like him?
Well, the competition he played at, he's a big guard, played for Kentucky. Kentucky makes great pros. So I like him and the kid, Cameron Johnson. Two kids who can really, really fill it up. And in the NBA, if you play a little bit of defense and you can fill it up, you have a shot. Like a guy like Romeo Langford plays great defense, but he can't score. These guys can really fill it up, and they're big. They also can really shoot it from the outside. So that's attractive to me, and I think teams, when they bring these guys in for workouts and see how they can fill it up, you look at the teams who have won, and you look at some of the Golden State over the last couple of years, they win, yes, good defense, but they can score the ball, and you need to score the basketball in this league. So, I think those two guys, both Johnsons, can really fill it up, and I expect to see both of them drafted, in the top 20, top 25.
All right, let's move on to the offseason. Oh, this could relate to the draft as well, because I'm going to ask you who you think the surprise player is traded this offseason. Feels like every year we get a surprise player traded. During the season, it was obviously Kristaps Porzingis. Who do you think is the surprise player traded this offseason?
That's a really hard question, because it really could be anybody. I think when you look around the league, I think it's more looking at certain teams and looking at who might want to shake things up considerably. And off the top of my head, I'm just trying to think of a team that would look to make a major change. And off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but guys with teams like the Spurs, I wouldn't be surprised to see them try to shake things up a little bit and maybe make a major trade for a pick. Can they somehow go Marcus Aldridge for the fourth pick or something like that? And I think when you look at some of those teams who make these major trades, it's really usually about that, about really trying to shake things up a little bit. Difficult to predict, especially when you look at all the stuff coming out of Houston right now, and check my timeline over the past couple of years. How low I was on the Chris Paul signing, and how I would have never done that if I was the Rockets, and now they're stuck with the worst contract in basketball. And I don't know who will take Chris Paul. I think the Lakers were really the only one who would even sniff at it. And now with bringing in AD and not having any kind of cap room, they can't even take him on. Guy like from out of the Wizards, I wouldn't be surprised to see them move Bradley Beal if the right package came to them. They've got an incredible amount of money locked into John Wall, and that's a mess. But beyond the Wall, they really have no other commitments after next year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Bradley Beal moved.
Yeah, I think Bradley Beal is probably a player that could be moved. I wouldn't consider that a surprise. A surprise to me would be like a DeRozan or an Aldridge, like you mentioned how you thought maybe the Spurs. Another team that's interesting to me that nobody's talking about, the Miami Heat. They have the 13th pick on Thursday night, and Hassan Whiteside just opted in. I think Goran Dragic also opted in. What's any moves for them?
I'm sure Riley and Spo are two of the best in the game. I'm sure they're looking at what they can do. No, they're not going to win with that squad that they have down there right now. Whiteside is like the classic case of a guy who just doesn't have the skills in today's game to really compete with the best. Can certainly block shots and rebound, but that's past us when it comes to the needs in the league today. So I expect to see them do some sort of movement, but it's hard to say, who they're targeting or or what they're looking at. I'm sure Riley and Spell are all over it, though.
Yeah, Riley's a guy that's never afraid of big changes. You mentioned the Rockets and their turmoil before. I'm fascinated to see what they do. Bill Simmons threw out the idea of Clint Capella being involved in the Pelicans trade with the number 4 pick. Do you think that's a guy that could be on the move, or do you think that they find a way to get rid of that Chris Paul contract?
I don't know who could take that Chris Paul deal.
I don't know who either, because I thought the Lakers probably, but they traded for Anthony Davis, so I think they're stuck with that contract.
The only one that I could potentially see is Boston, actually, and some sort of package with Gordon Hayward where the money can potentially work. And because they, are losing Kyrie, and you could bring Chris Paul in for the last 2 years. I have never been a Chris Paul fan, and the market for him again is really, really small. He really can't go by anybody anymore, and isn't really limited a player at this point, especially with how much he's played. So I just don't know who could take it. But Boston might be a really interesting fit for him, and it's really the only fit that I've been able to uncover. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with Chris Paul. Capella, I'm sure I know they're shopping him. I'm not sure that's a great fit in New Orleans. Although when you think about the West right now, the West is going to go to LA, and you're going to have somebody fit Anthony Davis, and Capella's a very, very solid defensive player. Just not sure he's worth the 4th pick.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you. I don't know if he's worth the 4th pick either. Do you think the Knicks still get Durant despite the torn Achilles?
Yeah, I think Durant's got a real shot to come to New York. I think the Knicks will still offer him that max. He will spend his summer in New York. He moved everything out. Got the surgery in New York. His business partners in New York. As you know, I've always thought that New York was happening. I had some great information from people very, very close to his camp and inside his camp that the major cities is where he wants to be. He's not happy living in San Francisco, which is a little bit of a sort of quirky city, especially for a guy like KD, who's a pretty quirky guy. It's a very interesting offseason. 5 of the 7 best players in the league are free agents, point guards all over the place, and point guards available, guys like Mike Conley and others. So it's a real crapshoot what's going on right there. But I think when you look at the Knicks, I think their strategy of sure is let's go after KD. He can sit for a year. Let's build around the young pieces with RJ. Let's have another lottery pick next year, and then add that lottery pick with Durant and some of the younger pieces, and maybe add another piece. But it's a crazy situation right now, and something that obviously has really changed the landscape of the NBA when you look at that KD injury.
Yes, I agree with you that it absolutely changed the landscape of the NBA. That was my first thought was I saw KD go down in that finals game. Kyrie Irving is set on Brooklyn, apparently. Do you think that's a done deal?
I do. I think Kyrie and Brooklyn are a perfect fit, which opens up D'Angelo Russell and where he might be able to play. I know the Pacers are really interested in D. Russell as well. I know Phoenix. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Knicks take a shot at Russell. I think he's a nice fit in New York as well. So, Kyrie wants to be back home from South Orange. Just bought a house in South Orange, and just feels like him and the Nets are a perfect fit.
Yeah, I do like that Kyrie Irving, Nets fit. And the idea of Russell with the Knicks wouldn't be such a bad idea because they need a point guard that can shoot. And D'Angelo Russell, to me, is a great fit there. And he's young, and he probably won't win the most improved player, but to me, he was one of the 3 most improved players in the league this past season. Kawhi Leonard is also a free agent. Do you think he stays in Toronto or goes elsewhere?
I think it's between them and the Clippers. I think if he stays in Toronto, he'll sign a very, very short deal. Neither would surprise me. If he does go to LA becomes really the incredible basketball capital of the world with AD and LeBron in the Lakers, Kawhi and another stud in the Clippers, and Dwayne Wade and LeBron's son playing high school ball together as well.
Yeah, that too. The banana boat kids playing high school ball together. I think that's funny. You mentioned how you thought.
The funniest thing would be if all these picks that went to the Pelicans, 2024, 2025, it would be classic if they used that as the first pick to take Bronny James, LeBron's son. That's the deal that Anthony Davis, that came in the Anthony Davis deal. It's sort of funny and ironic if it led to them taking LeBron's son with the first pick.
That would be so funny if that happens. You mentioned before how you thought Chris Paul had the worst contract in the NBA. I think it's John Wall. You mentioned John Wall before. Do you think the Wizards are dying to get off of that contract and dumping it on somebody like how Brooklyn just dumped Alan Crabb on Atlanta? Do you see that happening or no?
Brooklyn, that's a very different situation now, and Crabb didn't have anywhere near the amount of money. I think when it comes to Chris Paul, it's challenging. Alan Crabb was a little bit more easy to swallow. But again, anything could happen. Both were bad contracts. I think Paul's much worse.
Wow, you do think Paul's is worse. I think Wall's is worse because at least Chris Paul, I know he hasn't been healthy either, but Wall hasn't really played in a long time.
Yeah,
and
we don't know. You're right. He hasn't played, and he's coming off of major injuries, no question. But he's been off for a while, and who knows what will happen with him? I think the challenge with Wall, we're comparing the two worst contracts I've ever seen. Obviously, with Wall, the challenge with him is his game has been built on speed, and these injuries are going to take away a lot of that. It's just hard to say, but I'm not going to say one is that worse than the other. They're both absolutely horrific, just horrific.
Yeah, they're both pretty bad. How about DeMarcus Cousins? He's an interesting free agent. Do you think there's a chance he goes back to Golden State? Because I wouldn't rule that out at all.
I would rule that out. I don't see Boogie going back to Golden State. He signed a 1-year deal last year with the idea that he was going to cash in this year. I think if he stays in Golden State, he has a chance to get hurt again. The guy's very injury susceptible, as we saw the last couple months. If he gets hurt again, he'll never get a deal. So I think he'll try and maximize the opportunity this year, especially with guys like Clay and KD potentially off the market. I just don't know how a team can invest so much money in a guy like Boogie. He's coming off of I had the Achilles injury. It's very, very difficult to come back from. If you saw anything of Boogie in the finals, you saw that he had 0 left. Yes, he was finishing in a couple games. Those are also games in which Curry was being double-teamed and the defenses were moving all over the place. They were throwing the ball to Boogie, and he was finishing on layups, but really struggled to get off the ground. And as these guys get older and they play a lot of minutes, like a Carmelo as an example, now like Boogie with his injuries and the amendments, he just has no lift, and I just don't love him with his size and all that weight that he's carrying around. I'm sure he'll put on some weight in the summer. It'll be interesting to see what team takes a shot on him. I'd see a small 2 or 3 year deal. I wouldn't be shocked to see him actually come over to the East. He spent a lot of time in the West his whole career out West, and I think there are teams in the East that would.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see where he ends up. Who's a sleeper off-season team for you?
That's a good question. I think Chicago has some interesting picks. They can be a little bit of a sleeper, so I wouldn't look past a team like Chicago. I think you take a team like Indiana. They also have a really picks, and they've got a lot of cap room, so I can see Indiana making some moves. There's a lot of pieces out there, and there's a lot of teams looking at make some moves, so I wouldn't be shocked to see just 2 teams in the East. In the West, I talked about them a little bit before. The Spurs don't like to be quiet, or they like to be quiet, and they like to pull something off that nobody's expecting. So I can see the Spurs making some moves that nobody expects, like a potentially move of a guy like DeRozan or Aldridge.
Yeah, that's a good call with the Spurs. My sleeper team, I'm going to go with the Atlanta Hawks. I feel like that's a team that really showed promise last year, especially at the end of the year. They have Trae Young and John Collins. They could potentially move up in the draft. They have some cap space, I believe. Do you see that as a possible fit for Boogie?
Yeah, I mean, that might make some sense. They need size. They've got 3 picks in the top 20. So if they can add those 3 picks plus a veteran. The problem with a guy like Boogie, and I'm sure the Hawks are thinking this, is I just don't know if he's the best influence around a bunch of young players. You know, John Collins is a young jumping jack, and to add a guy like Boogie, who has a terrible work ethic and has been in all kinds of problems with his attitude, I'm not sure you want to add him to that equation. I think he's probably a little bit of a better fit on teams where he can make a difference from a veteran. You know, whether that's a team like Charlotte, whether that's a team like Indiana, team out west like Portland. Obviously, they're going to get Nurkic back, but you know, finding a place where Boogie can contribute as a veteran and be a veteran leader as opposed to going into a young team.
Yeah, it would make more sense if he didn't go to a young team. I just threw out the Hawks because I feel like that's a team that could make a move that could surprise us this offseason. So before we go, give me an offseason bold prediction.
An off-season bold prediction. Well, it's pretty bold to say that I think the Spurs will trade one of their stars. You might see that. Bold prediction. No, I think Tobias Harris will sign somewhere that nobody realized. It could be Brooklyn. He might come with Kyrie. I can see that. I don't know. It's a good. That's a good. I think the other prediction I would add is I think Kobe White will go in the top 5.
Interesting. I was going to say Al Horford returns to Atlanta, but you seem to think that he ends up back with the Celtics. I
don't think that's a bad call that you made. I can totally see that. You know, I think he's going to end back up with the Celtics, but he's the kind of guy that would be perfect for Atlanta. A nice veteran, good teammate. I could see something like that happening. He's a great teammate, and I could see something like that absolutely happening. The Celtics have a bunch of picks in this draft. It'll be interesting to see what they do. But I can see Al Horford going back to Atlanta. I like that call.
You know what? I have a different one. I like this call. I think Mike Conley gets traded to the Celtics for the 14th pick. That's my call.
Yeah, Conley is a big weapon. I'm not sure they'll do that for the 14th pick, but yeah, Conley is going to be. I could see the Knicks getting involved with Conley as well.
The Knicks and Conley, I'm not so sure. I really think that Durant injury really, because I agree with you that he probably will be a Knick, but if he didn't tear his Achilles, I think Anthony Davis is in orange and blue. That's my bold call. I think Anthony Davis is in orange and blue right now instead of purple and gold if Kevin Durant doesn't tear his Achilles.
Yeah.
I really think so. I think the Knicks would be being talked about a lot right now if Durant didn't tear his Achilles. And I know there's that crazy rumor out there about Kyrie and Brooklyn and Durant being like the package deal, but I thought that was smoke. So my offseason bold prediction, I'm going to go with the Celtics trade for Mike Conley after losing Kyrie Irving. I'll go with that.
I like it.
Yeah, I like that call too. And I think Atlanta and Al Horford's a little bit ballsy, but
I like that.
But you really think that, you sound like you think Horford's going back to Boston. So, Yankee game tomorrow for you? That sounds like fun.
Yeah, taking my son, graduated 5th grade. Going to hopefully not get some rain and go see the Bronx Bombers in this big-time lineup. Looks like they might get rained out tonight, so we'll have to wait and see Stanton strike out a couple times tomorrow.
I think Stanton is actually going to come back with a vengeance. I really do. And then Judge back over the weekend. should be an interesting couple months for the Yanks as well. So I hope you have a great day. Maybe you'll get a doubleheader tomorrow. You never know.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, I think the problem with a guy like Stanton is you can't swing any harder than he does. He's always, looks like he's swinging with a vengeance. I think, those guys, especially Stanton, are, really good regular season players, but it's the same story when you get into the postseason. The pitching is different, and guys, it's not just so easy to crank homers when you're down 6-1 and stuff like that. So you got to get timely hits. He's really struggled with that last year with the pressure. Hopefully he learned a little bit while he was out how to get a little bit more timely when it comes to his hitting.
Yeah, I do think he has learned his lessons a little bit, but we'll see. I hope they actually get the game in tonight. So it's good to have you on the podcast, and I'll have you on after free agency. We'll go over all the moves.
You got it. Thanks for having me.